Time's 5:30, and I will go ahead and call the Finance Committee meeting to order for December 15th. So tonight we kind of have a short agenda, a couple items on the agenda to discuss. And then there was a couple other items, and Councilor Chavis, I may ask your opinion when we get down to the end if you'd like to have those added to the committee tonight, or we want to discuss those in the full council later on this evening. So the first item that is before us is resolution number 2021. It's providing funding to the Inspire program. And I thought I would start this morning this evening with some representatives from Inspire. We have Angel and Barbara here to give a short discussion and presentation about that, and would be available to answer any questions about their program. It's a wonderful program. I'm excited to have you here to talk with us. So the microphone's right there. I'm not sure that the camera is necessarily on you for everybody at home, but they can hear you.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Angel Wallace, and I am the Client Engagement and Community Programs Manager for Lutheran Child and Family Services, and I am over the Inspire program.
And I am Barbara Walters. I'm the Director of Strategy and Innovation for Lutheran Child and Family Services, and I work on all our new program development and collaborative activities.
Yes. So we just wanted to come in tonight. Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to present in front of you. But we just wanted to share a little bit about what we do with the Inspire program. So the Inspire program stands for Identify Needs, Support Potential, Increase Resiliency, and Empowerment program. It is a fairly new program that piloted in 2019, and it has since then grown. So what we do is we collaborate with Lawrence Township Schools as of right now, and we're planning to expand that as well, but we collaborate with Lawrence Township Schools to receive referrals for working families who need support. And the type of support that they need that we identify, education, workforce development / economic assets, building social capital, health, and well-being. So what we strive to do is uplift these families from the situation that they're in creating a network of social capital and resources that they can be self-sufficient, but not only self-sufficient, thrive.
So one of the goals is to help families find community resources and connect to those resources that they may not be aware of, as well as developing their own potential. So we work with the whole family, not just the adults, but with the children as well, to try to have a real holistic approach to services. And we utilize a number of collaborative partners to help us in that service delivery, and that could include Goodwill, Indianapolis Legal Aid Society, and others that we are continuing to grow our list of partnerships.
Yes, so in speaking about collaborative partners, Lawrence specifically has been wonderful to us. Like I mentioned prior, we are collaborating with the Lawrence Township Schools. So the Inspire program is officing here in the community, serving the families here in this community. So on Tuesdays, we service out of the Lawrence Township Trustee's office, meeting with families, doing intakes / needs assessment, and then referring them to community resources as relevant. And then on Thursdays and now Fridays, we office out of the Lawrence Township the school district administrative building. So we're there again in person, really trying to serve these families in their community.
And we do have a long history of service in this community with our Sharing Place Food Pantry, which you may or may not be aware of. It's also located in the school district's educational building there. And so we serve families throughout the township plus a few other zip codes, but we serve about 40,000 people through that program. And we noticed that some of the people would come and get a bag of food, but they had needs that went beyond just the immediate need for getting food. And we're trying to find ways that we can help families escape a cycle of poverty and develop the skills and resources intrinsically to help them get to that next step.
Yes, and so the gist of the program is that we want to really work with those, again, working families, the families that might not be in poverty, but if one thing happened, like their car broke down or they had a loss of employment for a time, that it could really debilitate their family. So we want to help them create a network of resources so that they can stand stable in their own 2 feet, as well as their children as well. So, does anybody have any questions about the Inspire program that we may answer?
I'll just lead with, I think, one, and it's on the front page of your flyers, so if not everybody got that, but are there any costs to the folks that you work with?
No, we have a nice grant from the United Way Family Opportunity Fund that allows us to operate the program, but we're seeking to expand the number of families we touch, so the support from your city would be helpful to make sure we have enough resources to continue to provide that at no charge to any of the participants.
Yes, and we would like to have a focus on City of Lawrence families specifically. So what funding would do would allow us to have space within the program to focus on these families specifically.
And what does that process look like? So from referral to working with you for a City of Lawrence family, what would that process be for them?
Yes, so once they're referred to me, they'll meet with myself or someone on the team to complete a needs assessment and create a service plan, which will outline how we assist or uplift them. We also, like Barbara mentioned, have a network of collaborative partners in Goodwill, in Legal Aid, in Thrivent, so they are the experts in whatever services they provide. For example, Thrivent is financial literacy. So if we are seeing a family that needs budgeting assistance, well, I'm not going to sit and budget with them. I will lean on the expert to do that. So we will create that service plan together, and then we will continue working with them through that process. So if they're referred over to Thrivent for financial literacy, I will walk alongside them with that referral while also meeting the other needs of the family. And then we operate with the family until they are successful. There is no time period for the Inspire program. They don't get kicked out after 3 months or 6 months. It's an ongoing process because we know this is ongoing work.
And it's self-paced, so one family may move faster to self-sufficiency than a different family based on their own circumstances and needs. So it's individualized.
And as someone who is, a direct care provider, I see a great need in this community for the Inspire program, and we just need workforce. So we have a plethora of referrals, and we're getting new ones daily from the school. So it's amazing to see the work that we can do in this program for this community.
So just to clarify that last sentence, so you have existing referrals now and existing families waiting?
Yes.
City of Lawrence families waiting for your service?
Yes,
for
yes.
this assistance, okay.
Yep. It just, it's capacity. So with assistance, we could really do some great work.
Sure. So I think I've asked several questions. I'd like to open it up to the other counselors. Chevrolet, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple. Can you walk me through the application process that you went through in order to come before this council for these funds?
So I work in the community, and through that, I have been able to speak with people about this program. And it was just in conversation, really, about thinking how we can expand capacity that we come before you today. So yeah, that I would say that's kind of where it stemmed from, was conversation.
So it's just more of a conversation, but not a true grant application process like you get. Let's see, what did I see here? The pilot was funded primarily through a Family Opportunity Fund grant for the United Way of Central Indiana. So there's usually a process that you probably had to go through to get those funds. I'm curious of the process that you went through to solicit these funds.
For these funds, I think it was more organic in Genesis. So Angel built a relationship working at the trustee's office and made connections in the community. And that's how we came to be aware that the need was substantial in the community, and that there were potentially resources that we could tap into from the city's funding to help support the citizens of the city.
Counselor Chavis or Counselor Giles? Do either of you have any questions? You're both muted at the moment.
This is Counselor Chavis. I had a question. So what is the plan to, this is a current program, I understand, that has been in existence for how long?
Since 2019.
Okay, so without this funding, what was the plan to service the community?
We hope to be able to do some service, but it's, again, a majority of the work is people related, so it helps us enable our organization to have people on board and our organization to do the direct work. So this is to basically expand what we're doing to be more embedded into the community.
And we are currently serving Lawrence Township families, but we want to have a specific focus on City of Lawrence families as well. So what that will look like in programming through this funding is we'll have just kind of a carved out programming, so specific programming just for City of Lawrence families and more direct services. We'll have more capacity to serve them more than we could now.
And are you reporting data back on the service?
We
That's the intent, isn't it?
With United Way, we have a pretty robust system of data reporting requirements, and it's very flexible to carve out specific segments based on zip code or what have you, or address or whatever. So we can carve out by certain demographic groups the service statistics, the demographics of the people served, and outcome and output information.
So your work with MSD Lawrence Township, then with this, you'll be able to isolate City of Lawrence data very specifically and say the need that you've addressed, what result was and the outcomes.
We can put in a code in the data set that would say like the referral source is X or Y or Z, and then pull data based on that referral source.
Okay, thank you.
So, Chair, I had a question, if I could, please.
Please, and then Councilor Chevlot's next.
That's fine.
Go ahead,
You go
Councilor
ahead,
Chavis.
Councilor Chevlot.
You asked first, Councilor Chavis, I'm sorry, and then
okay.
Councilor Chevlot was after that.
so-
Just queuing you up.
Do you receive funding from Lawrence Township Schools?
No, they are not a funding source. They're a referral source. They are providing us access to families that have exhibited strains or stressors that are impacting the student's performance. And a lot of times those go back to economic and family circumstances. So they're primarily a referral source. They're not a funding stream for us.
Okay, so how do you intend to ensure that the whole township's important, but our funding is, we're focused on our city. How do you ensure that the funding is focused on those that live in Lawrence? I know you have reporting, but how do you do it on the front end?
Yes, so that will be more through service provision, making sure that we're catering to the City of Lawrence families. Like I said, whether it's through programming or it's through direct care service, we'll carve out an amount of time, hours per week that we're serving City of Lawrence families specifically.
Okay.
All right, Councilor Chevlot.
You mentioned, you mentioned something about the organic process of how this came to be, and then there was a comment about the data. I'm curious, in those conversations that weren't necessarily codified in a grant formal process, were there any conversations on, with respect, because I have a experience in this, so anytime that I write a grant, there's all of these provisions that in the event the grant funds get distributed, that there's a responsibility upon myself to go back and account for how these monies are reused. So is there anything in place that, with this agreement, that there's a conversation or at least a requirement to come back to say, here's how the funds were used? And
We are receptive to whatever requirements for reporting that your city would.
but nothing has been said.
Nothing has been
Okay.
established and codified at this point.
Okay.
But for United Way, for example, it's very detailed.
Yeah.
And it's quarterly reporting and on both data and kind of qualitative
Yeah.
reporting as well.
Okay,
So
thank
we're
you.
very accustomed to the reporting process.
I figured as much. Thank you.
And to follow up on that, would your data reporting back to the city of Lawrence be comparable to what you would be reporting to the United Way?
Yes, we would try to use most of the same kind of parameters to make our lives easier, but if there's any specific measures, we can add those as well. So the system's pretty flexible to add, different, and we have a number of different grants through United Way, and we use the same database for all the grants. It's just, and some grants have different targets or objectives, so you have a little bit different measurements, but kind of the core things like the demographics and such, those pretty much stay consistent.
So Chair, I had another question if I could.
Yeah, please.
A few questions, actually. So are we looking at this proposed resolution as submitted as a 3-year, $25,000 per year?
So that was as it was submitted, and the thought process was the data would be reviewed with each funding step, if you will.
Yeah, so I think Councilor Chevlot was alluding to this, and, I would just have to say that, as we continue to go down this path as a city, that I do believe that we're at a place where we need to have a formalized process for requesting this funding and for, a process for reporting, et cetera. And I also believe that if we're going to continue down this path as a council, that we need a separate budget line for these types of grant funding that should be outside of the discretionary fund. That's just my opinion. I also do not feel comfortable with committing to 3 years of funding. Our budget is yearly, and I wouldn't feel comfortable committing to more than a year. And then I think it would be important for the council to see reporting and outcomes, and then there be a more formalized process going forward to request these types of grant funds.
Okay.
Councilor Denny, I mean, Councilor Chavis is spot on. I couldn't agree more. I think, and you guys are accustomed to this kind of process. The city of Lawrence, this is fairly new, and I know that there's been an attempt in the past to try to put some processes in place, some guidelines on how the taxpayer dollars are going to be used. And I think in this particular case, if there's a possibility to keep this in committee and maybe review this, because I don't think these funds are necessarily needed right now, but maybe review this to give us time, because we've already voted on next year's budget, which has some type of discretionary funding for the council. But I know personally for me, I would feel much better if we had processes and procedures around how these monies are used or how they're distributed, but in turn, organizations like yourself would come back and be able to say, okay, here's how the money was spent, here are the results, and here's the impact in the community. For me, I would feel much better to have those processes in place rather than right now, there's no guardrails. And this isn't anything on you. What you guys are doing are great work. This isn't anything on you guys. In my opinion, this is our responsibility to put these things in place. And it makes it easier for you to be able to follow this and to be able to adhere to the guidelines. Because right now, you don't have any guidelines, and so this isn't fair to you, but you don't have any guidelines about, okay, 25 grand a year for 3 years, what do they want from us? Do we need to come back? And none of that, based on what I can tell, has really been ferreted out. So that would be my recommendation, that we keep this in committee. We adjust this per Councilor Chavis's recommendation. We can't commit to anything for 3 years. Our budgets are every year. But to put in some of those processes in the city, in municipal finance, I've been doing this a little bit, you really can't spend any money without it being accounted for, because every year we get audited by the State Board of Accounts, and every dollar that the city spends, there's processes in place that they have to show how the money was spent, what the goods were for, and there's, it gets a little bit more complicated. And this one is a little worrisome. Again, this is not on you. This is something that's been, I've been vocal about it in the past, that we need to have these for our protection, but also for individuals like yourself, so that you know what the rules are, you know the guidelines are, so that you can come prepared and say, here's the great work that we've been able to do by having these grant funds. So I'll just kind of leave it at that, Mr. Chair. But
No, thank you for the comment. And I think that is the direction that the conversation is steering. One possible solution, and part of what makes this program ideal for the conversation that you're talking about, is they work already within extreme strict parameters, both with the United Way, and because they are a referral source from MSD Lawrence Township, which is already state, has state supervision on what you can do with the data that they receive. I'm wondering if a compromise position, because here we are at the end of the month, or the end of the year of 2021, and we have 2021 funds available that we don't carry over to 2022. Perhaps fund the first year at $25,000 and ask for a review next December, utilizing the guidelines that we would discuss over the next 12 months.
Well, the funds actually do carry over. They get put into the reserve fund, but we have the same level of funding next year that we do this year. And again, so my point, I don't know that this is time sensitive, but I'm thinking that if we were talking about this in January and you guys had guidelines and processes in place that you can come back in 6 months and say, here's how we spent your money, I think you would feel more comfortable from an accountability standpoint. But from my perspective, we just went through a pretty volatile budget season, and we were all worried about our reserve fund, and whatever we haven't spent gets put into the reserve fund, but we also cut $3.5 million out of a budget, proposed budget, sorry. So I just, this is just my finance analytical brain and process brain. I would feel more comfortable being able to say, here's the process, here's the guidelines. Again, this isn't anything against what you guys do. I read this before I got here. I'm very familiar with what you do, and same with Shepherd Community. They kind of all work together. But for me, I think having processes in place would be better, and to wait a month, because we do have $250,000 next year for things like this, than to have these kinds of things in place so that we can start 2022 with a fresh slate. So anybody that comes before us has a process and an application in place that they know, okay, here's what I have to do, here's the rules, here's the parameters, and it also protects the city that we're not dispersing funds without any type of, and I use this word, but any type of guardrails or instructions. So.
And we're accustomed to like United Way, Lilly Endowment, any of those kinds of people. They usually have what they call a grant agreement.
Yep.
And it would outline the objectives and the measurable outcomes that are anticipated, and the budget, and et cetera.
And I think, Mr. Chair, I think it'd be pretty, and I'd be happy to be a part of this, but I think it would be a pretty simple process to put a grant agreement together from the city's perspective for anybody that comes before us. And I only think that's fair, but I'm just one.
Counselor Chavis or Counselor Giles, do either of you have any further thoughts or questions?
Tom, I'm glad you reminded us, because I honestly couldn't remember that the funds that we don't spend in the discretionary get rolled to reserve. I couldn't remember. I felt like we didn't lose them, but I couldn't remember where they rolled.
Yeah, they just roll back to the reserve because it's cash, it's money's unspent, so it should just go back into what we would call, not emergency, but reserve funds, because that's where the funds are coming out of now. Anything we spend are out of our checking or savings or what have you. But if we don't spend it, it just stays in there. So these monies are there next year for us at the same level that they were this year.
Right.
Well, that was kind of the point I was making. If we've used all of the funds this year, not that any of these proposals utilize them all, but if we utilized all the funds, it does revert back to the 250,000. So there's additional funding and projects that are open to us next year as well. That was when I said we'd lose it. That's what I was getting at. So yes, that 250,000 will be in our discretionary budget January 1st. But if we fund projects in 2021, those funds will still be there in 2022. Plus, we would have the projects that were funded in 21.
Yeah, I think it's just important to point out, though, that we don't lose it.
Yeah,
You know,
it doesn't evaporate, right? It's just, our discretion. We have a 2021 discretionary budget and a 2022 discretionary budget. The funds don't evaporate. It's just the access to the discretionary portion.
But Mr. Chair, I do have a comment. But money is money, right? That comes once. Money is cash. Money is withdrawn and deposited. So, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but technically, if we don't spend the money, and even though we funded the budget for this year and next year, there's the money is there, and we still have the money. Instead of spending 500,000, we have 250 spent, which is the right thing to be a good steward, I think, of the city's money, in my opinion.
Mr. Chair, could I make a legal clarification?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, just to be clear, yes, any unspent funds anywhere in the budget that were allocated and unspent in the general fund go into reserves. And so, yes, the money is still there. That's absolutely true. Just to be clear, the money is still there, but the money isn't necessarily allocated. So, for instance,
Right.
you would need, if you wanted to spend more than is currently allocated because you think there's money still there, you would need to do an additional appropriation to use those reserve funds for that purpose. So I just wanted to be clear on that, and also state, I think I've stated this publicly during other grant conversations, I also would be far more comfortable if we had a formal process, an application process that was open to all to avoid any appearance of impropriety, as well as to give all nonprofits an opportunity to solicit funding, as well as ensuring that those funds are spent appropriately in Lawrence for what they were supposed to be used for via reporting, recognizing fully, and I know Councilor Chevlot is familiar, sometimes grant reporting can be more onerous than doing your programs, right? Your substantive work out there, your servant work, but so I wouldn't want to make it so laborious as to make it difficult for some of the small groups that are doing great things in Lawrence, but certainly think that is something that could be put together, and certainly something that not all cities and towns, but many do have in place.
Yep.
Do you have any further comments? So that's sort of a new process that we were proposing after some of these are brought forward. Is what is, I think Counselor Chevlot had asked the question, waiting a month or if we go another month. What's the need now and what impact does that have on your service provision?
Well, I mean, we do have a long waiting list of people that are just going to wait longer is the basic outcome, because we can't hire more people than we have funds to compensate them for. So that will, it'd just be a longer waiting period.
Yep.
But we approached you about this opportunity, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so had we not, or whoever approached you, you would still be operating under the way that you are now, but
People that were in need would have longer waiting times.
sure, but at least in this, the prospect is that if we could get together, and I think we can, I think there's general consensus amongst the council members that if we can get together it doesn't have to be, as our legal counsel said, onerous. It doesn't have to be. We could do a very simple, clean process and agreement, and in 30 days you're back before us. I think you would feel better about it because you know, here are the rules, here are the guidelines, and then I know myself would feel much better about looking at using taxpayer money because there's a program and a guideline in place, and there's assurances that you can come back and you can present and say, here's the great benefit that it helped the city. So, you know, again, this isn't anything reflection of you because you guys aren't the ones that came to us. It sounded like we came to you, which is fine. But if we were able to put our minds together between now and January 2022 and come up with something, I think it would be better. And again, as our council attorney says, it's more equitable because right now I don't have any guidelines to be able to discern one way or the other. And so there could be any number of organizations that come through and say, well, I'm asking for $5,000 or 10 or 15 grand, and I've got no way to be able to differentiate. And so in my mind, I like clean processes, and this isn't, again, this isn't on you, but it just doesn't feel as tight and clean, especially spending taxpayer dollars, which is what we're all responsible for up here.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
The only comment that I like to add to this, appreciate the ladies coming and sharing their program and their time, is don't hold your breath to the January date. I think that as council, we have to have some conversations that I don't think is the appropriate time maybe in this meeting to have. So I would just only say to you that I believe that we may be supporting you, but unfortunately, I think we got some work to do and some discussions on our end. And I want to thank you as a Lawrence Township, as a City of Lawrence resident. Thank you for the work that you're doing. And a lot of the work you do is in my district, and we appreciate, I certainly appreciate that. But we're going in a direction which I think is a good direction that we're going into, but we need to get our stuff, get our house in order, and we look forward to inviting you back when we do.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Thank you. And I think sometimes it's, you know, when we have these in front of us and then we begin these discussions is how this process evolves and develops. And so that is.
All right.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And that is a conversation we've had for back and forth for a while. So it is nice that we're here. But it is nice to have the knowledge that you are working in the township with us. So I would believe then, just with the suggestion that we keep these items, assuming both items then, in committee.
Isn't there three? Wasn't there a third one added just today?
So there was a couple other items, but were those, just a point of clarification, were those added to the Finance Committee or are those still part of the full council?
There was an amended agenda that added a new proposal to this.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, normally, as you all well know, it would be introduced at a regular council meeting first before going to committee. I will say that the chair can add anything to the council agenda that she likes or change the order or anything like that, that's perfectly fine.
I see the email.
But I believe your committee meetings also say you can talk about additional items at the discretion of the chair. So I think it would be appropriate if you wish to discuss it as a committee, those two new ones, you certainly could. I don't know that it's appropriate since it hasn't been introduced formally to actually vote on a recommendation. But given the conversation you just had, if you want to talk about these other two, perhaps that's timely. Obviously, that is up to the chair and the rest of the committee.
Well, I sponsored one of them, so, and I actually think that since they're on the agenda, I'll just assign them to committee is what I would prefer to do. And since we're going to, we seem to be in consensus or agreement with coming up with a formalized process, I would just like for those resolutions to be part of that as well, because they're really, the ask is the same.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, can I ask Ms. Walton a question?
Yeah, please.
I had thought, Kathy, that normally anything that isn't passed at the end of the year would have to be reintroduced. But I don't find that in council rules. So are we okay?
Yes, we're perfectly fine, because this happens all the time.
Okay,
It's
good.
when the full council is going out, and a new council is coming in, and
Gotcha.
the autonomy changes,
that
then
makes sense.
then it's done, but this can continue on.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. I was trying to look that up as I was talking, and it's hard to do two things at once. Thank you.
Right, and that, I believe that answers my question, was did we want to hold an off on discussing these other two, or discuss them and then have the other conversation down the road?
I would prefer that we hold them off.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like that we're working on. So there are two others in the Finance Committee currently, but we'll hold until we have this other discussion, which it sounds like the full committee would like to have. Hey, are there any other, no other items on the agenda? Is there any other comments from any committee members? All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you.